Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. We're revving this live up. Hello, everybody. It's been such a devastating time, and I wanted to take some time to hop on live with you all to discuss a lot of what's going on at the moment, and to really be in community with you all. I want to provide you all updates about the present situation. I want to make sure that you all have updates in terms of what I've been up to, and making sure that you have transparency about have some of our actions and things like that at the present moment. But I want to discuss everything that's going on. Now, I think there's first things to be said is that there is no way to discuss the conflict with Israel and Palestine without making someone extremely angry, and angering people in power, angering people in general, angering people on the internet, and I'm just gonna say that up front. And frankly, that's a big reason why I think so many people have been silent around the human rights crisis that Palestinians face, and the subjugation of what we're seeing. But I think that moment is changing. Oh, I think someone said audio gone. I think that moment is changing, and I want to talk about it. And again, there's going to be folks that are going to be upset at any number of things that I say, but I think it's at least important that you all have transparency about where I am as an elected official, as well as where other people are. So first things first. As I've titled this live, I am one of 18 members of Congress, that 17 or 18 members of Congress now, that have co-sponsored a resolution calling for a ceasefire. And that has upset many people. To me, a ceasefire involves the cessation and pause of hostilities that we're seeing. I also believe we must have a ceasefire in terms of the blockade. Well, we must lift the blockade and the human rights crisis that it precipitates on food, water, and electricity into Gaza. It, in my view, constitutes collective punishment. And the idea that 2.2 million people must starve and be exposed to diseases of water and more, the idea that should happen in order to, as punishment for Hamas is wrong. I must also say that Hamas's hostage taking also constitutes a war crime. And what we saw on the 7th of October was an attack that was an affront to humanity. And the violence and the hostility that we saw with that was just unbelievable violence that should never be accepted, ever. And I think sometimes some things that upset folks in this conversation is a core tenet and a belief that I have, which is, and that many people have, human rights organizations have, is that war crimes do not justify other war crimes. Hamas's actions, which are horrifying, disgusting, an affront to humanity. I have sat with the families of hostages this week and listening to experiences that 3-year-olds who are currently held hostage by Hamas had to witnessing their parents murdered, them taken. There are just no words to describe the depravity of that. And it's astonishing. However, that does not justify those war crimes. Do not justify the war crime of a blockade. It does not justify the war crime of collective punishment. It does not justify this indiscriminate bombing that we see. And it does not justify the starvation of Palestinian children. It does not justify the death of thousands of innocent people. And a lot of times when I bring up the ceasefire, I want to address the first critique right off the bat. The first critique is, well, what are we going to do about Hamas? And sometimes people more aggressively say, you're on the side of Hamas. Or they'll say, which is just, I think when anyone says that, anyone who is advocating for de-escalation of violence is on the side of terrorism, I think we need to really understand how disgusting of an accusation that is. You can disagree with a ceasefire 100%, that's well within your right. But the idea that people who are advocating for the safety of children and an end to occupation are on the side of terrorists, we need to take a step back. We need to take it a step back. And you know, to talk about this critique with Hamas and say, well, you know, if you believe in a ceasefire, you're on the side of Hamas. What is your plan for Hamas? Let's rewind and see what's going on right now. How many Hamas are there? Does anybody know? Put it in the comments here. If you know what the population of Hamas is, or the number of militants that are established in Hamas. The current estimates are around 20 to 25,000. And for that, we are looking at the collective punishment of about, and you know, some people are saying 30,000, 40,000. Let's say we'll put that range between 20,000 to 40,000. Let's say you put that range. The population of Gaza is 2.2 million people. 2.2 million people. We are blockading water to 2.2 million people, or 1.1 million people in northern Gaza alone. We are blockading water for 2.2 million people. Food, electricity, in order to target a population, a militant population that is in tens of thousands. Additionally, when you look at the current bombing campaign going on right now, how effective has this bombing campaign that we have seen been in the elimination of Hamas? If that, let's say we accept all of these, you know, these statements, these points, right? I know there's a lot to be said about how things are phrased, whatever, but let's just take the talking points, right? How effective has the current bombing campaign been so far in the elimination of Hamas? The state of Israel, the government of Israel has said, our number one priority is the complete quote unquote elimination of Hamas. And there have been statements made to the effect that that is more important than getting the hostages out, more important than protecting innocent civilians, the most important goal. And so if that is the most important goal, we would think that you would have that completely measured, correct? That the public should be getting updates almost every single day. But what the public is getting updates on, what we're getting updates on, is in thousands of Palestinian children that are dying, the thousands of innocent people that are dying. And the idea that this is going to come at a cost of thousands and thousands of civilians, and we don't even know how effective this bombing campaign is. In 6 days, the government of Israel dropped more bombs in the small, concentrated area of Gaza than the United States had dropped in an entire year in the entire country of Afghanistan. And I think it's important that in this environment, there's a lot of disinformation and a lot of misinformation. So when I state something, I'm going to tell you what I'm citing. With that, I am citing the Washington Post, who themselves quoted a defense and military expert who was involved in with the Pentagon during this time. Okay? So that's where I'm getting my fact on that. And so we have basically done a year of Afghanistan in 6 days. Surely there should be some reporting. And not tomorrow, not, oh, let's get some numbers in some days. This should have been happening the entire time, correct? If this is the number one goal, there should be continued assessments that the public knows, that everybody knows. Instead, what we're getting is the number of innocent Palestinians that are dead and wounded. I am a member of Congress. Every year, the United States passes a defense budget. And what we hear consistently in this defense budget is how precise weaponry is, how advanced technology is, how targeted and sophisticated all of our military equipment is. And yet what we are seeing here is indiscriminate. And I know that even though in my day-to-day job, I am in an extreme minority in Congress, I'm actually in a wide majority of the American public, because polling was just released on Friday or just late last week that showed 66% of the American public supports a ceasefire. 66% of the American public supports a ceasefire. And so this notion and the gaslighting that happens in Washington all the time, especially around issues of defense spending, it's something that I think is a phenomenon in our politics, but it's one that we have to be aware of. And, there are some things that when we see them should just simply be an affront to humanity. When we see the atrocities that were committed in Israel on October 7th, when we see the atrocities of in bombing these targets, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. Hamas is currently holding about 200 hostages, and they must be released. It's a war crime. it's a war crime. The government of Israel, for many years, have been detaining innocent Palestinians without charges. And that also is something that should be named and raised. Additionally, I think another thing that we need to take a look at, and there's a lot of different elements to this, right? But I think that the incredible amount, and someone said, the hostages that Israel is holding, that is also something that should be discussed. That has come up over years. And that is absolutely, the numbers and the estimates, I believe, are in the thousands. But war crimes do not justify war crimes. And I think that is something, that is important to say and to center. Additionally, context is not the same thing as justification. And that's a two-way street, right? Context, we must talk about the context of what's going on. But it's not the same thing as justification. And that's a two-way street. And so, like I said before, this is an issue that there's no winning in speaking out on, right? I've learned that there is no right way to discuss this, because as reasonable and as responsible as you try to be, you try to stand up against violence and the killing of children, you can be called both a terrorist sympathizer and on the side of oppression and with the establishment within the same minute, talking about the same sentence. But that doesn't mean that we should be silent. That doesn't mean that we should watch this happen. And very often, someone will tell me, why care about this? And it is because this is one of the largest places that we see our U.S. public funds go. The United States is an ally of Israel. There is no questioning that. There is no questioning that at all. And I would say to my friends who are, have been some of the most vociferous supporters of this alliance, what I would say is that when we talk about the value of democracy, what makes democracies different, the argument for democracy, is that democracies are different because we respect rule of law, because we center civil and human rights, because we are civil societies that are democratically elected, that represent the will of the people. And in times of war, we should be upholding our democratic principles and be an example to the world about what makes democracies different. And even allies, or even if you are friends, let's bring it down to the friend level, right? If your friend starts doing something wrong, it is your friend's responsibility to bring them in. We have a responsibility to follow our laws. The United States has something known as Leahy laws. Leahy laws, the Leahy law prohibits the United States from providing military and funding and other kinds of defense assistance to governments that are involved in gross human rights violations. That's U.S. law. And what we just saw was a State Department official that just resigned last week, who is in the thick of these types of defense transfers program, saying that we are not applying Leahy laws to what is going on with our ally. This is about this, in a lot of ways, this is about the United States and our commitment. Now, I know and we see that President Biden has been engaging Netanyahu, and we are seeing them urging restraint in some ways. I know you're seeing this, and a lot of people may be rolling their eyes, and I'm not here to change anyone's mind. What I am here to say is that I think that people organizing is working. And I can at least tell you that historically, as much movement as there was, and I'm just going to be real, as much movement as there was on the ground, and I'm not saying that people weren't organizing on this issue before, but I will say in my 5 years in Congress, I got almost no calls into my office advocating for Palestinian human rights. There's a lot of people who post on Twitter, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is that was not translating into civic action and organizing. It just wasn't. In 5 years, like a handful of calls about Palestinian human rights. In the last 2 weeks, week and a half, hundreds of calls, hundreds, if not past beyond 1,000 at this point, from my own constituents, my own people living within the borders of New York's 14th congressional district, advocating for ceasefire and advocating for de-escalation in this matter, and that organizing and that message, I would just say to not relent in your civic organizing, and do not, don't buckle to cynicism, to people saying that, that the script has already been written. It hasn't. I say this because it is so important for us to center our humanity here. Israeli people are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas. Our shared humanity is what gives us hope. And I'm seeing some comments here, one person saying, as a Jewish person, I need you to speak out against anti-Semitism too. I would be more than happy to. Anti-Semitism. And I also, we cannot also not talk about the Islamophobia that we're seeing in this moment as well. But it is very scary. And I also think it's very important for us to hold space. One of the most valuable conversations I had in the last week was that someone said, one of the things that's so difficult about managing this issue, at least in terms of domestic U.S. politics, is how driven by fear it is. And once people are scared, your brain only reverts to 2 or 3 places, which is like fight, flight, and then a lot of times people will say, like, they'll add a third or they'll add a 4th, freeze, whatever it may be. And when our fear is activated, then we can't, when your fight or flight is activated, we go back into our corners, and it becomes very difficult to discuss any issue. And it's important to kind of dismantle that. So anyways, someone had asked me to talk about anti-Semitism, and I'm also going to talk about Islamophobia. We are an environment, a domestic U.S. environment of a lot of fear right now as well. And it's important to name that. And I think one of the challenges that has been that because people disagree with the fact that a person feels that way, because they feel like a person's fear is not justified because they don't, they have a different assessment. It doesn't take away that emotional state, which then charges and drives on a large level. We have a responsibility to protect one another. And as a congresswoman for the Bronx and Queens, my primary responsibility is to my constituents and the safety of our Muslim and Jewish communities. And that becomes an even higher priority in such a tense time as this. And so it's important. And I'm very proud of what I've seen in the discipline of certain spaces. We've also seen very troubling incidents of anti-Semitism that must be called out and checked immediately. And we've also seen very disturbing incidents of Islamophobia as well. We've seen violence happen, and we cannot allow that to get out of control here. To some folks who are saying, I saw someone say, like, why didn't you use your platform until now? I want to be super upfront about that. I have been vocal and active about this issue. It has largely been on Twitter because I'm working and I am pushing legislation. I'm organizing. I'm meeting with many different advocates and such like that. And so I've only personally been able to focus on one social media platform. And so that has largely been Twitter or X, but that's why I went on live today. Instagram can be a little trickier sometimes because you have to make images and whatnot. But I'm happy to, if you look up my posts on Twitter, you can see that I've been talking about this. I apologize for not being more active on Instagram, but I'm also, these are still my accounts. They're not run by staff. This is my Instagram account on my phone. Same thing with my Twitter account. Believe it or not, a lot of people would say that's crazy, and it kind of is, but that's what it is. I know that there's, again, plenty of critiques to be made, including tons of critiques about what I'm sharing with you all right now and how I'm sharing it. I'm not saying that those critiques are wrong. There's no way to speak about this perfectly. And also I'm speaking to this to 8 million people that are on this platform that come from all different kinds of backgrounds on this conflict, that come from almost no understanding of it to those who have lived it. But I thought and continue to think that it is important for you all to hear from me directly. And what's so important is to continue to remain civically engaged. I know people roll their eyes at calling their member of Congress. You're rolling your eyes because people in power want you to roll your eyes. It's not cool to not call your member of Congress. You're not cooler than everybody for thinking that you've dismissed this system. Let me tell you what's going on. While everyone's saying, oh, Congress doesn't work, I'm sitting my butt at home. We get calls from people who are advocating for status quo all the time. You know how many Fox News watchers call my office on a consistent basis? And it matters. It does matter. Even if your member of Congress doesn't respond to you, you should know that they know that you are calling. You should know that. It's not cool or trendy to be cynical. It really isn't. It doesn't make you more knowledgeable or better than anybody else saying, oh, calling your member of Congress is pointless. The war machine's going to go on. That is an excuse to do nothing, to just tweet from your couch. Now's the time to get up and to engage our community and to come together as a community on shared values and principles of humanity. And we have to do it and also remaining vigilant and remaining accountable if you see a claim, especially one that is shocking, find a second source. Find a second source. Disinformation and misinformation is flying all over the place in all directions. We have to be responsible stewards of what we share. And it's not great, but that's the information age that we live in. And so, that is just what I advocate for. Someone said, drop the number. I can share it on my story, but if you've been, in addition to Twitter, I've also been doing email because that's longer form. So you can sign up for our email newsletter at ocasio-cortez.com, and you'll get our longer form updates about this. And we've been emailing the number and social media link as well for how you can look up your rep and call your representative. So I'll post that on my story when I'm done and wrapping up here. Listen, I'm sure people are going to continue arguing from the quote unquote left or right or up or down or whatever, and taking, one sentence of this longer live out of context and whatever the heck it is. But, it's worth the risk. It's worth the political cost, because for me, my primary motivation right now is to save lives and to figure out what is the best strategy for saving lives. I'm just doing my best, like everybody else. And with that, let us hope. And if you're a praying person, I'm a praying person. I just pray that we get some sort of relief in the coming week, that lives are saved in the coming week, and the tearing apart of families and children stop in the coming week. Another day and another movement in just trying to do the right thing. But again, it's important for us to hold space for one another, to hold grace for one another, and to also understand the grief and the trauma that has been activated by so many people that were affected on October 7th and every day since October 7th. So thank you all so much, and wish you the best. Bye.